Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meetup by IxDF Kerala, sponsored by Experion Technologies. I believe most of us love traveling, right? Now, think about the last time you completed the most important action of planning a trip. It could be booking a flight or placing, just booking a stay. Instead of a dry confirmation ID, what if the screen said, "Hey, buddy, you're all set. Pack your bags and we will just mail you the details." So that shift, right? The single sentence doesn't just fill empty space. It made you, most of those words, right, made us smile. It actually made the software feel alive and instantly builds that connection with us, more like a goodwill. That is the magic of microcopy. It actually gives a cold digital interface a really amazing personality. So today we are decoding humanizing user experience through microcopy. You see the small words that build better experience. We are looking at how the tiniest phrase turn everyday interaction into very memorable and joyful experiences. To break down the craft behind this effective product writing, we have Amal with us today, Amal Krishna, who will help us turn complex interfaces into clear human conversation that guides user without unnecessary jargon. Right through his years of experience and by working on different projects, he will guide us through this journey today.
So welcome to today's session and thanks everyone for joining in. So today we'll be discussing on the topic humanizing UX through microcopy. So in the past we have discussed like a lot about design in general, layouts, typography, systems, process, etc. Right. But today we'll be focusing on understanding a bit more about the simple yet a powerful topic on microcopies and how they affect the overall user experience. Before diving deeper, since we have an audience from a diverse background, we'll start with the general introduction on what a microcopy is. So, by definition, these microcopies are tiny bits of text in an interface that guides, reassures, or inform the users. So, you can see these are like buttons, labels, error messages, empty states, tooltips, and notifications, right? Definitely, you all have come across several microcopies in the products you use. You might have noticed it. Sometimes you might not have noticed it. But in case if the experience goes bad, right? Once you struggle to perform something, or like if there is a difficulty with a certain task, then you will start to kind of look for microcopies to understand how this particular function or a feature will work. So in case you are getting it confused with like the UX copy, microcopy is still a UX copy, but these are like shorter and precise. A UX copy is like a broader term which is being used, but microcopy is just a subset of that. And these are not like explanatory in nature. Um, Now you understand like what a microcopy is, right? At least it is like some small text in an interface that cause something to the experience, right? Now consider this imaginary scenario. You open Claude and you land here. You see this page, right? I just want you to observe this page and all the text here. And do you think that anything is like wrong here? I just want you to observe. You can focus mostly on the text, right? And for most of you, it might seem okay. You won't notice anything weird, right? Some might feel there is something off, but not kind of breaking the experience, right? It will still get the job done. This actually is not the actual Claude interface. I kind of edited the text in it and took away the emotion part of it just to make it like feel a little bit robotic. Now you can see that like on the top it's telling you Claude AI assistant and enter the prompt here, right? It sounds a little bit technical if you see. But if you go to the actual Claude interface, right, now you can see the actual version on the screen. So notice how the tone have shifted. It now tells back at it, Amal, and how can I help you today? So suddenly, uh, from a robotic, it become a more conversational, right? So instead of enter a prompt here, it is like, how can I help you today? Although the other version might have get the job done, here we have kind of built a connection with the user, and you will feel like this is more like a conversational, right? So for humans, it will be better and they feel at home when it feels like they are conversing with the person, not like they are kind of talking with a robot. Because like talking is like a natural interaction for us as humans, and you will feel comfortable with it, right? And now you understand why a small word matters, and what you have observed right now is like a why the small word change. The words of what you write is like a magical thing, right? A slight word might shift a tone, it might mean something different, right? So words have definitely a power of their own in a microcopy. Just to give you like one more scenario, which feels like more connected, in case if you are using, like most of you might have been using WhatsApp, right? You might see in that small text on top telling you that this is end-to-end encrypted, right? It doesn't mean that the particular user wants to know like what technology of encryption that you're using. It's just to bring a little more sense of security, a sense of like privacy in the chat, so that the user feels like it is like more private and it's like a conversation between like these two people only, right? So it's like a smart way to place a microcopy there and kind of build trust, right? And now we'll talk about like why a microcopy matters. You might have already figured it out. It reduces the friction on like how the user uses a product and build trust with the product. It also helps shapes perception like in the user's mind about what the product is, what is the overall experience they are getting. Right. Let's dive a little bit deeper into uh, each of these. So how a microcopy reduces friction, right? So a microcopy can reduce friction by kind of providing you clear guidance even before the confusion happens, not after you do something wrong and kind of telling you, right, this is wrong. It is more like upfront you are getting notified and getting guidance, right? So if you see on the example on the right, uh, it is telling you there is an input field and there is a helper text. Example, ellis@gmail.com and maria@gmail.com. So what the text actually does is that it is showing you a sample format, which is like email ID separated by comma and kind of guides you on what format is expected in that particular input field. Right. Another example now you can see this is like a common one. And whenever you have like a file to upload, right? So this is like a common module that you see across all the apps. So here the microcopy does two functions, right? One is tell the user on like how the interaction should be performed, like choose a file or drag and drop it here, right? That is like one thing that microcopy is doing. Second, it also tells the user that what kind of files is expected and like what is the maximum size expected, right? It tells them JPG, PNG, PDG, and MP4 formats up to 50 MB is supported. So that gives you upfront info on what is expected so that you don't make any mistakes upfront. Now, it also helps you to build trust. So microcopy can also bring in an element of trust. It can also bring in this empathetic tone and reassures the user, mostly during vulnerable situations like payment, billing, or like sign up, etc. So in case if you observe the example on the right, you can see that there are small microcopies placed smartly. Like you can see that like this is a Razorpay trusted business, and it also tells you that it is secured by Razorpay. So most of the times you might also see other messages like it is like 24-bit or like something like what we saw on WhatsApp, like end-to-end encrypted, right? So how this becomes useful is that, so consider a scenario where a user have entered like a new website and he proceeds to purchase something, right? He might not know like how credible the website is, and suddenly he proceeds to the payment part. And if when the user notices that this is like a Razorpay trusted business and the payment gateway is like Razorpay approved, it brings in small amount of trust. And this particularly might not apply for all user. The user will have to know about Razorpay and how trusted they are, right? And that is how a microcopy can be used to bring in the element of trust in an interface. Uh, yeah, this is the other example that we have discussed about the WhatsApp. So you can see if you haven't started a conversation with someone, there is a friction, right? So to break that friction, they are kind of placing it as the first message before the first message to kind of initiate a chat with them. So you can see the message on top, and it's like messages are end-to-end encrypted, and only the people in this chat can read, listen, or share them. And you can also learn more, like if you want to kind of deep dive. So our job is on to only notify the user on what the core message that you we want to communicate. And thirdly, microcopy also helps to build perception and shape them. So a very few chosen words that if we use correctly can convert like a product from like very cold to a caring one. So uh, just to make it easier for you to understand, like if you see an error 404 message, a common user does not know anything about what 404 is. It doesn't mean anything for the user, right? It's just a 404. There's no action. He doesn't know why it happened anywhere back. Nothing that he can do with that. But if you see on the example on the right, which is like very famous, it is from Amazon. You can see that it is telling that, sorry, we couldn't find that page. It is kind of an apologizing tone to the user that I didn't do something wrong. Like as a user didn't do something wrong. It's just the website and they are apologizing. And they're also asking us to go search in Amazon's homepage. They're also offering a resolution to the problem that we are facing. And I'll be sure that like you might be observing the dog there, and you might be wondering why this unrelated dog is sitting in an error 404 page, right? It's kind of distracting also, right? So let's try to understand what is happening there. Like we might be slightly kind of deviating from our topic, but we just need to understand how visuals, when combined with a good microcopy, create a good impact, right? Firstly, you can see the copy. You saw that like instead of the error 404, we have the sorry, uh, we couldn't find that page and the resolution message that we have, right? And secondly, we noticed a puppy. So why that puppy is because this puppy creates an immediate positive emotional response. That's what psychology research says, that cute animal images can reduce negative emotions and increase a positive feeling. So even if we are landing on an error 404 page, right, we might not feel that much annoyed. We might still look at a puppy and maybe navigate to an Amazon homepage, right? And secondly, these are not random dog images. So every dog that you see here are actually owned by Amazon employees. And Amazon in a workplace, if you consider, they are like very dog friendly, and they want their employees to kind of bring their dogs to their office spaces. So what they are trying to convey is that they are humans, like Amazon as a company. It is subtly tells or gives out a message that we are humans and we love our pets and our workplace, and they have a personality without even saying any of it, right? They just smartly placed a dog and did all these things, right? It doesn't fix an error. Like we landed on an error page, but it doesn't fix the error or does do anything about it. But it kind of change the feeling of how each user feel about the error. That is why microcopy combined with visuals and emotional design are meant to do. We can dive a little more into some common microcopies that we use. Like commonly, we might have used like this invalid input field. Like in case of like, consider the scenario of you are doing a form validation in an input field, and you are getting this message that it is like invalid input. So there is like when you see that message, right, invalid input, it kind of slightly elevates the frustration level as if like you did something wrong and like the user feels blamed for that. Like you provided an email ID and it's like invalid input and suddenly you are blamed, right? And instead, we are telling the user that this email doesn't look right. Want to try again. Sometimes we might not have kept the @ symbol, or the email ID might be wrong. But the thing is that the suddenly the tone shifts, right? The tension dissolves and the interface suddenly feels like a helpful friend, right? Another use case is something this when writing all these messages, right? In a micro While writing a microcopy in general, context is always the king. So I'll just tell you the context in which this message is created. So this is like for a B2C app which is like friendly in nature, and they want to throw out an error for node 3 access denied message. So instead of that, because if I am a user and I see error for node 3 or error for node 3 access denied, I don't know why that happened and what to do. Right. So instead, we switch to a more human tone and we'll be like, oops, you don't have access to this page. Check your permission or contact support. It feels more like a human who are willing to kind of offer you some help or support, right? So in case next time you are writing an error for node 3, try to understand the context and maybe think about writing a better microcopy. Um, and talking of the goals of the microcopy, right? We have these three core goals of why we have to use a microcopy. So firstly, we have to um, inform the users by delivering the information or advice. Secondly, you can use microcopy to influence the user to make a specific choice or connect with the brand. Third, you can support an interaction within an interface. We can see how each of these are done with a microcopy. So here we'll see how a user is informed by using a microcopy, right? So when you are kind of going to create a password, if you see the first example, you are going to create a password. And even before typing, you are getting a microcopy that the password might be at least like 8 characters and contain one number, one uppercase letter, and all the required parameters, right? So giving this upfront reduces the chance of errors, right? They upfront know, even before typing, they know, right? This is how a microcopy is used to inform. And secondly, on the payment part, you can see in the security code, right? There is a small visual and tells you that 3 digits on the back of the card. In case if the user doesn't know what a security code is, if they have security code instead of CVV or something, uh, this visual, along with the small piece of text, will exactly guide the user on where to find that and what is expected there, right? And thirdly, you can see that input field for that date there. And the small DDMMYYY format that you can see here, it's actually guiding the user and telling them that this is the expected format and make sure that the user doesn't mess it up, right? And secondly, you can also use the microcopy to influence. You can place these microcopies smartly so that you can kind of guide the user to make a specific choice. So on the first part, you can see a pop-up where there is like subscription, elevate your journey, and there is like a subscription plan, right? So along with the visual, they are telling you that it is like less than $2 a week for that particular option only, so that more users will be kind of aligned to it, and they might conceive it as like that is like a much value offer. And on the right also, you can see that in the yearly uh, plans, right? They have subtly included a microcopy on top telling you that for you 50% off or like 62% savings, right? So these microcopies, if smartly placed, you can also kind of increase the conversion rates or whatever the KPI that you are having in hand. You can use the microcopy smartly to kind of guide the users. And thirdly, you can also support an interaction within an interface, right? So there might be a loading state, error state, and empty states and errors that you are throwing out in an interface, right? So you can smartly use like good microcopy, like your account balance is too low to order this payment terminal is one message that you can see on the first, or something went wrong, can you try again? Like these small messages within an interface when you do an interaction is something which supports the user, right? It communicates to user the system status, what screen they are in, what they are expected to do, right? So all these things you can do with a microcopy, right? And whenever you are consider writing, consider to write a microcopy, right? You can always follow the three C's framework. These are three principles that transform the functional text into an intuitive user guidance. So firstly, you should ensure that your microcopy is clear. That it is like very specific. You don't need to use any technical terms. You need to make sure that the user understand whatever language that you are writing in. It needs to be concise. Like every word needs to earn its place. You will have to cut out the filler text, cut hedging. Like the minimum number of words that you want to convey a message is what it makes it concise. And thirdly, it needs to be conversational. And by means that like we need the microcopy to look more like a human conversation and not like a robotic or like a technical one, right? So we need to keep these three C's framework in mind. It needs to be clear, concise, and conversational. Since we now have like a basic idea on like what microcopy is, the goods, the bads, and how it affect all the three C's, you have a broader idea on all that stuff, right? Let's now touch upon an important aspect which affect a microcopy. Um, like imagine that the user, like you are a person who are responsible for writing a microcopy for a B2C meditational app. You might be also having a B2B, a very formal setting app. You might be having something like Spotify, right? And if you write a microcopy in a similar format, voice, tone, everything, right? It might not appear correct, right? Which means like if you are using an Apple product and suddenly you get a system pop-up telling that oopsie doopsie, something went wrong, it suddenly feel like it's not Apple, right? So that is why voice and tone is important. Let's first talk about the voice. So voice is something like a product personality that you have, and it should be consider consistent across all the touch points. Consider like your product like a person. He can be friendly, he can be serious, he can be formal, right? You have this image about this person or a brand, right? So that is the brand voice. So for example, we can see that on the right, like Slack wants to communicate like they are like confident. That is the brand voice that they want. MailChimp, for example, they want to appear friendly. And Duolingo, if you have used it, it is like very playful. It's like a language learning app, and they want to be uh portrayed as playful. And tone is something uh, like you can be serious, but depending on the situation, right, you might have to be adjust your tone, right? You sometimes have to be little bit helpful, little bit empathetic, supportive. Like you might have to warn the user. Like there is a tone shift that is happening, right, based on emotion. So in case of an error message that you're throwing out like an error 404, we first need to tell the user sorry, right? It's like an apologetic tone. Right. And in case you're onboarding, we might need to kind of encourage them a little bit, right? For example, like if you see a neutral message is something like page not found, right? And if you want to make it like little bit supportive, we can tell them that we couldn't find that page. Try searching or return to the home page. That is like a little bit supportive way of telling page not found. And a highly supportive way, which I don't recommend using unless like the user have special needs, which is like looks like that page took a detour. Try searching or return to a home page. We will help you find what you need. There's like a lot of text, right? The user might sometimes feel like they are like get kind of like we are like spoon feeding the user on what to do, and they might appear like too small. We don't want to do that to our user unless there is a specific set of user who need like this kind of an instruction. So that is when we use like a highly supportive tone, right? And we can also go through some of the examples that from the brands that we have talked about. So, for example, we talked about Slack, right? They want to be like confident and irreverent. That is the brand voice that they want to kind of use. And whenever they want to throw an error 500 message, they will just tell you that, oops, something went sideways. That is the tone and that is the voice that they want to convey. It is never a corporate or never a formal message. You won't find Slack telling you something like very formal. And considering MailChimp, right, it wants the user to feel that they are like friendly, warm, and approachable. So whenever you create a new campaign in MailChimp, right, It won't tell you that the campaign that you created right now went live or like it is successful right now. It's not the way how MailChimp communicates. So it will just throw a message like boom, your campaign is live. That boom is what they want to kind of make it like very friendly, right? They will use these words to appear more friendly and celebrate the user's win, and not like exactly like the product's function. And Duolingo, if you used it, it is like very playful and encouraging. Like if you are like using Duolingo for like number of days, it'll tell you, it'll give you a streak actually, and it'll tell you that you are on fire like 47 days in a row. It is kind of motivating the user and encourages us to log in the next day also. And it is never a condescending message. And you might have seen this famous Pixar one, right? So Pixar as a brand, like you might have seen this Pixar animation studio. They do work for Disney. They are a subsidiary of Disney, right? So they want to communicate this message like they are like a very friendly, childlike brand. Like they want to communicate emotional authenticity, clear wit, and imaginative storytelling. That is what Pixar stands for. So along with the visual, they have written, "Oh, don't cry. It's just a four, not four error." Right. So that is how a microcopy suddenly shifts the user emotions and how we can play with it. Right. I think now you have a fair understanding of the basics of microcopy and how the brand voice and the tone kind of support a microcopy. Right. You have all the ingredients in place. Right. So most of you might not go analyze all this and kind of write a manual microcopy, right? Some might do, but for you, you might be expecting that you want to have a prompt framework so that you can put whatever thing that you want and give it to AI and get the microcopy, right? So this will help you to achieve that goal. This is like a generic framework for a microcopy. It will be helpful for new users who are trying to write a microcopy. So we'll be focusing on these four pillars like context, goal, voice and tones and constraints are some information that we need to feed in to give the um, AI to kind of get good results, right? So context plus goal plus voice and tone plus constraint. That is the actual framework that you want. That is like the key takeaway that we want to put in the put as a prompt to get optimum result. So by meaning context, right, we need to specify like what task are you writing? Like what are you going to write? Is it like a helper message? Is it like an error message? Right? Success state, error state, tool tips. You can mention like what task that you want the microcopy to write for. And secondly, where does this appear? Is it appearing in a pop-up? Is it appearing while during onboarding, right? Is it like while creating a password? And thirdly, we need to tell them who the user is, a little bit more about the user, and maybe like if you know like what are they trying to achieve, right? So all these things, along with like whatever context that you have, you need to put under the context bucket. And secondly, we need to uh, also mention the goal. Like we need to tell the AI that like what goal that we are kind of aiming at. Is it to inform the user? Is it to influence the user or support the interaction, right? So tell them like the user to tell them that if you're kind of doing the support and interaction, right? Mention that this is the goal. Like we need to reduce the error stage by informing the user upfront that this is the format that you need to use for the password, right? So that is one way that we can use this goal. And thirdly, the voice and tone, as we discussed right now. How does the brand always speak, and what tone, like according to the context, what tone should we use right now? And towards the last, we can mention the constraints. Like you might have this space limitations, right? You might have to tell them like this should be done in like 10 words. Like that is like the maximum character limit that we have, 10 words or like 160 characters. This was helpful for me. You can also ask AI to follow three C's. Three C's of microcopy if you want to specify, and tell them to avoid jargons, and also tell them like how many variations that you want. For example, you can ask for 5 variations. right? For a particular prompt that you are giving, you need to give like at least like five variations and kind of put your head into it, understand like which one suits for the context and select one of them. So for example, um, instead of writing, create a microcopy for a password requirement. That is like the usual way I used to do initially. Uh, Instead of that, we can tell AI that write a helper text for the password creation field on the first time sign up screen. The goal is to reduce validation errors by informing users of the password requirements before they begin typing. Mention that the password must contain minimum of 8 characters. Use a friendly brand tone with a helpful and reassuring tone. Keep each variations under 10 words. Follow three C's of copywriting. Avoid jargons and generate 5 distinct variations. This is how I write because like I have the breakdown in my mind, so I'll just write a paragraph like this. In case if you need to kind of break it down, firstly you can see the context. Write the helper text for the password creation field on a first time sign up screen. That is the context that we are giving, right? You can eliminate the user if it's like a generic thing. If there is like a user or like additional context that you want to give, this is like a special kind of user with this requirement, you can also feel free to add in the context part. Secondly, we are explaining the goal, right? Explain the minimum password requirements before the user type, reducing validation error. We need to reduce the validation error. That is a goal that we have. And voice and tone, friendly brand tone with a reassuring, friendly brand voice with a reassuring tone. That is the voice and tone that we have specified. And lastly, all the constraints that you have. You need 5 variation, 10 variation, under 10 words or like a character limit. So all these things you put under constraints. You can also give an example as a constraint, like follow this kind of a example, like that is like a common format, right? And after doing all this, the AI will generate like 5 prompt for you, right? Like then it's your job to kind of select one from it. That is when we use a microcopy checklist. Even if AI writes it, or even if like you write it, or like someone write it for you, this is a checklist you always have to kind of go through. You have to ensure that the microcopy and like you have to ask these questions. Like, does it have a clear goal? Is it like is the copy clear? Like as in the language is clear. Is it, do they have any jargons? Is it concise? Is it contextual? It's, does it match the brand voice and is the tone right for the moment? And also, would a first time user understand it? So you have to ensure that all these things are met. This is like a checklist, and you can always use it in any microcopy that you are using. And even if you do all these things right, you have done everything. You have gone through the checklist. You have done everything. This is like a golden thing. You always have to test with real users. Like what feels natural to you may confuse the users. So always you will have to test with real users. Like in case if you don't have access to real user, get a fresh eye, someone who might be seeing this microcopy for the first time, get opinion maybe from the developers or like the PMs, right? So then get opinion, get feedback, write it again, test, and revise. Like the cycle goes on like until you get it right. That is how design functions, right? And I just want to, before winding up, I just want to conclude that microcopy is the voice of your product that the user uses when they need the most. Make it human and make it count. Thank you.